I want to put people into remembrance of something. If you look at the country, when all of its inhabitants pretty much paid tribute to what our forefathers set up in this great country of ours with the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, obviously even going back to the Declaration of Independence, and the attack that's upon the foundations of the United States, upon all of our founding fathers, the slander, the total divorcing of this generation, let's just call it the tech generation, from historic reality, empiric reality, and history, I blame the public education because they have been used by the communist revolutionaries. You know this, that the goal was always to get a hold of a generation that within 40 years of that generation they could change the face of this nation. And I've noticed that you can see it in the articles and everything, but people just don't seem to care anymore. And by the way, most of the 20-year-olds that 30-year-olds can't even explain what the 4th of July is all about. What we're talking now about is the virtual world versus the real world. Now, I'll call that empiric world. In order for Satan to control humanity that's fallen, he has to set up something totally in direct opposition to what the living God intended for us to experience. And I call that empiric reality. He's also had to destroy language and interfere with communication on a personal level. So many people, Sheila, don't even talk anymore, even to their spouses. They text them.
Yeah.
So all forms of continuity of thought have been and are being cut off. And so that's the great divorce, even beyond what C.S. Lewis was talking about. The implementation of the destruction of mankind is underway, and that's why I wrote Terminated, the end of man is here. The number one goal in everything that Satan has done is to destroy the image and likeness of God, mankind created after, after the judgment on the world that was before, that even the disciples talk about, the golden age prior to the creation of Adam and Eve. But if you look at the plans of Satan with the fallen angels having sex with earth women, producing giants, people say, why are you on this giant thing, Quayle? Because Jesus told us about the days of Noah, and they forget one word, corruption. So now we're going beyond the corruption, just sexual and the immorality and all of the demonic influence. We're going into the transhumanist movement, and we're going into singularity. In essence, the powers of darkness want the last vestiges of humanity wiped out. And Jesus, if you got a problem with what I'm saying, take it up with Jesus, because he said if the days weren't shortened, there'd be no flesh left alive. And Sheila, that's where we're at now.
Yes, agree. Well, you wrote Xenogenesis, you wrote Genetic Armageddon, now you throw in the mix Terminated. What you're laying out in these books here, really, Steve, especially Terminated, I've got it, haven't finished it yet, but this, folks, is the stuff of nightmares. Steve, you really lay out nicely the imminent destruction that really lies before us. We're at a really crucial precipice. And again, like you say in your book, Terminated, these murderous secret plans of Satan's minions, these Luciferian elite, their agenda is to do one thing: terminate us, period. And that's not a cutesy phrase, Steve.
No, and again, having been at this, Sheila, for, 25 years as a newsletter writer, probably 10 years before that, so 35, I've been at this half of my life. I'm 67 in August. But what I think is interesting, I made this statement, and I said, outside of writing about ancient history and ancient finds, I'm pretty much done. In other words, Terminated is a statement of finality. And what Tom Horn and I have done, and isn't it interesting, and what God is, people need to understand this. I don't talk to Tom and say, Tom, I'm writing a book called Terminated, the End of Man. He didn't write to me and tell me until after the book was written, milieu, and he and I talked about that, and he probably explained what the milieu was on your show the other day.
Yeah, he did, yeah.
Yep. And so, we don't talk, yet God brings us together, and he will at Branson, the conference. We'll talk about that later, along with some of the great minds in transhumanism. The whole desire, the whole design is to make men God, independent of the God who created them, with no answerability or no responsibility to the former creation. Now, I'm saying that because I'm not going to write Terminated 2. To be continued was the last thing I put in my book, the last three words, I think. And the issue is simply this, that the headlines are happening so fast momentarily that I can't keep up with them anymore. And I believe based on Isaiah 46 that God says he is the Lord, declaring the end at the beginning, that I can follow suit. And that's what Jesus was doing in the book of Revelation, and obviously he's my example. We've got to tell the things that are, which will be coming, and the things that will be hereafter. There are three different time periods. So what I'm saying in a long-winded way is that we simply are at that point of termination, no flesh left alive, and the contempt that these people have for God, for Jesus, and for Christians is accelerating. So they are on their way to total terminal extinction, and unfortunately, Sheila, the churches don't believe this, they don't teach it, and they're not preparing the people of God to deal with if you will, what I would call techno-possession. When machines become demon-possessed, the first example of that would have been Talos, created in the time of the Greek gods, the Titans, the Olympians. And the follow-through of robotics, even through the film and cinema, Terminator, I think James Cameron did an amazing job of showing people Skynet. We now have Google. I've warned about Facebook. And ladies and gentlemen, now you understand why I'm calling it Faces of Death. You can hate me, you can hate the message, but you can't deny the fact that everything you have placed about your life on Facebook, for those of you who have, everything you've shared, your best friends, your entire network, your heart network, those people that you pour your heart out to, strangers, are going over every single emotion you've displayed, every single word, and they're building, if you will, an artificial construct of you, and then they're running the artificial construct of you through massive programming on supercomputers. So in essence, Sheila, people are already being assassinated in a computer program to be carried out at some near point in the future. Do you think many people can even begin to embrace that thought?
No, not even close. And which is why, Steve, I find it interesting. You and I both featured an appendix in our books, the open letter that Tom Horn sent to leaders on transhumanism. He was so concerned and so alarmed by this dystopic trance, this mind-numbed slumber that the church seems to be in. It's like a mind-blinding spirit, Steve. But Tom wrote this open letter because I don't think that Christians are getting this at all. Transhumanism really is transitioning away from being human. I think when you step back and take a macro view, you think people are comprehending that one, Steve?
No, and unfortunately, you probably deal with it better than I do because I become cynical and jaded, which, by the way, is wrong. And I'm dealing with that on attitude. And I will say this: I'm going to get to write a book, and it won't be like anything else. It'll be kind of like tears. But the Lord laid on my heart to write a book on Jesus, like no other book that's ever been written. Now, that's a big claim.
Wow.
But I also got it instantly. And so, one of the things I really believe, Sheila, is that the reason there's so many lies that humanity is embracing, the lies that are being embraced by humanity are setting humanity up for the destruction. They forgot one person, Jesus, who is the way, the truth, and the light. Now, look, I make no apologies, and I thank God neither do you. The churches are responsible. Many of the famous, if you will, 150-year-old preachers would always say that if Christianity were to die in America, it would die because the pulpits are dead. That's my version. But the point being is that we're at now a total embrace by them who are claimants to Christianity of every foul and unclean spirit that has been able to deceive them because of one thing: they have denied the testimony of Jesus. Now, I can tell you this: if you're in seeker-friendly churches, everybody's welcome except Jesus. I was talking to a man the other day who I love. I won't use his name because, number one, it's irrelevant, but most people would know the name. And he basically said the same thing, and I met him. He's raised up to write a book on the warriors, godly warriors, men, first and foremost, to step up to the plate. But he was told by a missionary organization, South America, and here's they said, you've won more people to the Lord, the kids have turned around, The power of God is present, but you got to leave. And he said, why do I have to leave? They said, point blank, because you talk about Jesus too much.
Unreal.
Yeah, and so I thank God for him. Jamie, God bless you, that's his first name. The fact that people are so... Now, remember, this is a Christian organization, a missionary organization. The guy and his wife are having the power of God, lives transformed for Jesus. Even those kids who have grown up are calling him, seeking out Jamie, saying, thank you for bringing us to Jesus. I know of no greater compliment. I know of no greater thanksgiving to give to the Lord when someone says, thank you for bringing me to Jesus.
Amazing, huh? Being kicked out of somewhere for talking about Jesus too much. Yeah, well, in a few days, my friend who was arrested in Canada for preaching the gospel is coming on. The scripture really clearly, Steve, presents Jesus as a rock of offense, a stumbling stone to all of those who reject his lordship. They stumble because they disobey the message. And boy, isn't that ubiquitous today. I mean, we offend people just by opening our mouths. And Paul says, what? I've become your enemy because I tell you the truth? People don't understand that are listening the amount of ugliness and nastiness that you have to deal with when you're called to be a watchman, where you're exposing the deeds of darkness. People cannot comprehend the absolute nastiness and the ugliness that we have to deal with.